Good morning. As the chair of the Youth Parliament, I extend a heartfelt welcome to you all. It is a privilege to serve in this capacity and to guide and observe our young parliamentarians as they get engaged with national, regional, and international issues. The theme of this 14th Youth Parliament for Commonwealth Day is Delivering a Common Future. As you may be aware, the Youth Parliament program serves to elevate and enlighten the younger generation in their pursuit of knowledge and information derived from their various areas of research and understanding of the issues. I am confident and proud to say that as youth parliamentarians, you all have demonstrated discipline as you prepared for these proceedings, and you've gracefully acknowledged and accepted the guidance and tutelage offered to you in preparation for this sitting. As you debate the sexual harassment bill and the opposition motion titled Restriction on High-Cost Housing and Implementation of a Land and Housing Purchase License for Non-Caymanians, it will be well received by all attendees and viewers. I need to also make it specifically known that considering our lack of legislative framework for the sexual harassment bill tabled by this youth parliament, this provides insight and the contributions to the debate will not go unheeded. It is extremely pleasing and promising to see the youth parliamentarians prepared to debate this issue of such controversial and emotive nature. It is also good to see that you all are taking the lead. Clearly, what subject matter and context expounded on during the debate will be taken on board by policymakers and legislators to help craft legislative framework in due course. So rest assured that all of your hard work will be relied on. The theme illustrates the Commonwealth Youth Parliament focuses on the future for young Caymanian parliamentarians. Undoubtedly, to that end, the Parliament fosters and ensures the exercise of good governance and expression of fundamental democratic principles, which are essential ingredients to any functional society. Noteworthy, there are 24 participants ranging between the ages of approximately 14 years to 25 years. I also want to say that in the last, I'd probably say 2 weeks, there have been former youth parliamentarians who have reached out to me who have passed the age of 25, who are still interested in being a part of youth parliament. And I just want to give my commitment in this honorable house that I will be advocating for the age to be changed so that students or young persons over the age of 25 can also continue to participate in youth parliament. Your impact and contribution will be felt not only locally, but regionally. We are elated of you all as our young people who play such an integral role in our youth parliament. This experience will be garnered as a pedestal for greater things in your life, and by the extension, greater society to be a beneficiary. I am of the view that if you consider our future with a purposeful and common aim, our society will be transformed for the better of all peoples of the Cayman Islands. I sincerely wish each of you all the best in your deliveries and contributions today in this youth parliament. Thank you.
Honourable Deputy Speaker and Chair of the Youth Parliament, Honourable Minister of Financial Services, the Honorable Deputy Premier, other honorable ministers, honorable leader of opposition, parents, invited guests, other elected members, and members of the Youth Parliament Committee. Good morning. Firstly, let me also add my welcome to all of you, particularly to our students who are participating in the Youth Parliament program. Before I do, though, it is customary for Her Majesty the Queen's message to be read in Parliament at the first opportunity after its publication. As was done for several years, Parliament is not now in session. Therefore, I take this opportune time to read it here. And it reads, "In this year of my Platinum Jubilee, it has given me pleasure to renew the promise I made in 1947, that my life will always be devoted in service. Today, it is rewarding to observe a modern, vibrant, and connected Commonwealth that combines a wealth of history and tradition with the great social, cultural, and technological advances of our time. That the Commonwealth stands ever taller is a credit to all who have been involved. We are nourished and sustained by our relationships, and throughout my life, I have enjoyed the privilege of hearing what the relationships built across the great reach and diversity of the Commonwealth have meant to people and communities. Our family of nations continues to be a point of connection, cooperation, and friendship. It is a place to come together to pursue common goals and the common good, providing everyone with the opportunity to serve and benefit. In these testing times, it is my hope that you can draw strength and inspiration from what we share as we work together towards a healthy, sustainable, and prosperous future for all. And on this special day for our family, in a year that will include the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting and the Commonwealth Games, I hope we can deepen our resolve to support and serve one another and endeavor to ensure the Commonwealth remains an influential force for good in our world for many generations to come. Elizabeth R. End of quote. I must also here tender apologies for the Premier who's attending some great matters of state, the Honorable Minister of Planning, who hopes to arrive later, is also attending matters in his constituency. Youth parliamentarians, I will say you may be appropriately categorized as our potential future politicians, or certainly our parliamentarians for this sitting and this purpose. And I can tell you, some of you are well on the way in learning the habits. As you are all aware, we can proudly acclaim this is our 14th year, 14th Youth Parliament, and the theme for Commonwealth Day is delivering a common future. As the chairman said, you will be debating a sexual harassment bill. Now, some weeks ago, our deputy speaker, your chairman now, talked to me about her desire to have legislation and what was possible as to how her bringing a motion to ask government to speed up the process. I understand there are now drafting instructions in play through the cabinet. So it is good for the government to have your views here today. As you can see, several ministers of cabinet are here, and also your opposition motion titled Restriction on High Cost Housing and Implementation of a Land and Housing Purchase License for non-Caymanians. Now, politically, if you want a hot potato to deal with, you deal with the last part of that. However, the theme highlights and symbolizes that the Commonwealth Youth Parliament is intended and designed to demonstrate to future young Caymanian parliamentarians the role and purpose of parliaments as an institution for democracy and good governance. And so this setting provides a valuable opportunity to network with other participants across the Commonwealth. And you should, and hopefully you are doing that, taking the time to talk to the other youth parliaments across our region, or in fact, the wider Commonwealth if you can. And I know, of course, you talk to current members of Parliament who act as mentors in the program. As a result, participants have a unique opportunity to develop leadership experience whilst also being empowered to make a positive difference in shaping the future of their own community. So our annual Youth Parliament, hosted by our Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, brings young people aged 18 to 25, and you heard some thoughts on that as well. But as parliamentarians, we are vanguards of the society. Undoubtedly, the future will bring many challenges, and the onus is on us to be prepared to equip ourselves in facing these difficulties and view them as opportunities. So we strive to develop a legislative framework and policy formulations for the development and progress of the society, and particularly of our youth. We shall all aim to develop our capabilities and be prepared to navigate the uncertainties in the future. For our common future, we need to be agile and resilient with a promising vision for our people. Because of our decisive and our prudent nature, we are envied across the globe. The example is evident in recent times, was and is, with our national response to the COVID pandemic. Our future behoves us to plan, develop strategies, and implement our plan for the betterment of these islands, and primarily in the interest of the younger generation, such as those of you who are present here today. Some of your, well, in fact, your motions and bills are things that we think deep about. We know it concerns our young people. And don't think that those of us who are already in the ring and know that you can vote soon don't think about you. We do. We know your concerns. We hear you from school. We see you at school. So we are concerned about the things that matters to you. And so, because we believe in a participatory democracy, we started the Youth Parliament. That was in our first term in 2001, our 2001 administration. And then successive governments have carried this mantle and strengthened it for the betterment and development of you, our young people. I am, and all the representatives of this House are extremely proud of all of you who participate in our Youth Parliament. You have all the demonstrations. You have demonstrated the maturity, the wisdom, and character required to engage in our program. The primary purpose is that we want our young people to come together and debate, as I say, the national issues in real parliamentary order. One of the issues for this youth parliament has to do with the emotionally sensitive sexual harassment subject, which is a worldwide problem. I am equally confident that an interesting debate will ensue from the spirited and now topical issue concerning the high cost of land and housing. It's a very hot topic and could easily bring heavy fire everywhere. As I said, a topic that is anything to do with people thinking that their land ownership is going to be restrictive to them. That, my friends, have caused the biggest demonstration in this country when I was just in my early teens. If you read some of the history, you might see it, learn about it. Land ownership is a hot topic. And Caymanians, you can do mostly anything with us, but don't touch our land. And you will learn that as time go by. But certainly, there needs to be a discussion on where you're headed. I pray for you. The Youth Parliament offers the empowering of leadership, and that's what you're doing, and equipping yourselves. We will listen attentively with your arguments and the relevant points you raised during your contributions, how you structure your presentation, craft your argument, distill and dissect the issues. These are critical. We will continue to encourage you to pursue your dreams and your career paths for a better quality of life and a continuous successful Cayman Islands. The caliber and quality and the character of the youth parliamentarians that are here, and I must say that I feel a little bit old this morning when I see Michael Glidden here, because I remember when he was born, I was at his father's and mother's wedding. I knew him from that height. So I am feeling rather older than I am, or maybe that I look. I don't know what you think, but I'm glad. My own granddaughter participated. She's now in university. I know there are students here who has come back to this meeting today to be here. So it means something to those who have been in it. And I strongly believe that as a leader, if we adopt the approach of foresight, our agility and resilience over the coming years, we can develop the appropriate government priorities, create policies, continue with our effective communication strategy to grow public trust and protect our global reputation in order to safeguard our positive values and future for the Cayman Islands. You have a government that is thinking in your direction. While the pandemic gives us challenges, it also gives us further unique opportunities in some regards to reset the clock and start afresh on a number of fronts. I strongly believe if you plan for our future with a common goal and objective, considering economical, spiritual, social implications, the well-being of the people and the environment, we will continue and will guarantee being transformative society. Therefore, having this overall common vision will be fundamental in delivering a common future as the theme prescribes. I wish you well in this Youth Parliament. I am indeed thankful as the Speaker of the House and President of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, I am indeed gladdened to see your participation, to see where you're thinking. God bless all of you, and God bless your families and caretakers.
Youth parliamentarians, good morning. And congratulations to you all. You made it to this point. Today, you are all going to demonstrate the results of all the hard work that you have put in over the past 5 months. You've invested many hours on weekdays and weekends to better understand how Parliament works and to hone your debating skills. I do not doubt this morning that the experiences of this program will serve you well as you move to complete your education and begin your careers. The theme of this youth parliament is delivering a common future. That theme is timely in many ways. First, you young parliamentarians are undoubtedly representative of the diverse cross-section of Caymanian society. Your backgrounds are diverse. There is a mix of genders, and yes, even your accents are diverse. You reside in Grand Cayman and the Sister Islands. You are being educated at various local and public and private high schools and local and overseas universities. This diversity, I strongly suspect, has benefited you as you have come together over these past months, sharing your ideas and coalescing as government and opposition members. Diversity has proved essential as Cayman increasingly emerges as a country that punches above its weight in global finance, world-class tourism, and quality, cutting-edge medical care. Undoubtedly, Cayman's youth are increasingly embracing our diversity rather than being concerned with our differences. You show that you understand the importance of diversity in creating a shared common future for all who live and work and call our islands home. The global pandemic has turned all our lives upside down, but there is, at long last, a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. We are all working hard, the young and the not so young, to emerge from a COVID-19 world. Not just to emerge from it, but to learn the lessons needed to build a strong, healthy, positive future for all of our people. We have demonstrated and determined that we will not be defined by the pandemic, but rather by our resiliency. Our common future depends on our being resilient. Cayman and the world have also recognized the need to be better stewards of our planet and avoid a future climate disaster. If the world fails in this regard and in this effort, it will be especially disastrous for those of us living on low-lying islands such as Cayman. So we must all succeed if we are to even have a common future. And lastly, every one of you will be aware of the atrocities now being committed against innocent people by a much larger neighbor. You know I'm speaking, of course, of the Russia-Ukraine war, a very visible conflict that plays out on the news and social media every day. But there have been other conflicts in recent years that may get less time on TV and on social media, yet they too are just as horrible. Young people worldwide must take note of these conflicts and the suffering inflicted on innocent people, including the very young and the very old, and endeavor to do more to avoid all such atrocities in the world. You may think that this is wishful thinking, but our youth are usually very good at being positive. You understand that we cannot have a common future if we do not accept and appreciate the value of every human life and peace and security. As we begin today's session in these hallowed halls of Parliament, I would point out that politics influences all the matters that I have just highlighted. And so, delivering on a common future may rely on many things, but it is very much influenced by things political. Such is the importance of politics, and such is the importance of what you have learned and what you will participate in and achieve here today. I wish you all the very best as you debate first the law and also a motion from the opposition. I thank you for the time that you have invested in this important program. It shows your interest, it shows your commitment, and it shows your desire to improve yourselves. I also thank the clerk and her colleagues who have worked on arranging this program. And of course, I thank my political colleagues for the many hours they spent in preparing you for today. Youth parliamentarians, I wish you all a very productive day. I know you might be feeling a little queasy in your stomachs right now, but above all else, just take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy yourself. That's what it's really about. I look forward to listening to each of you and your debates and conversing with you at the end. Have a very pleasant and successful day. Thank you.
Good morning. I rise on behalf of the Honorable Premier to deliver his remarks on his behalf. As Mr. Speaker has recognized, he was called away on matters of state. There are a few words here that mention his apology, but I don't think they do it justice. When he called me this morning, he was absolutely disappointed that he wouldn't be here to see you all in action, because it's one of the things that gives him quite joy as the Premier of the Cayman Islands. I will say this was short notice, but I think his rationale for having me stand in is that the subjects of your debate overlap heavily with the Ministry of Investment, Innovation, and Social Development, particularly social development. There is one benefit. I don't know when I'd ever get a chance to speak from the Speaker's chair. So I really like the power and the authority up here. I don't want to get used to it, Mr. Speaker. But good morning. I'm going to read the Premier's remarks verbatim, as these are his words. Unless I have a personal interjection, I will say so. I quote, "I am proud to be here with you this morning to celebrate this special Commonwealth Day as we focus on our youth parliamentarians. Wow, how time flies. It seems like it was just a few days or weeks ago that I was addressing the 2021 gathering of our youth here in these hallowed halls." One moment, I almost forgot something. I'll depart from the speech 1 second. I see that we have a secret shopper in His Excellency the Governor is here. And on behalf of the Speaker, I don't know that we'd had a chance to recognize you, sir. So on behalf of the whole House, welcome, Your Excellency. To our youth parliamentarians, I cannot be more proud. I know how hard you have worked since October of last year to make this day a meaningful success, giving your Tuesday evenings and eventually your Saturdays too. In fact, I believe your last session was just this past Saturday. Your faithfulness to this program shows true grit and determination. It is, I believe, a foretaste of what awaits you in the future. Today, your actions echo the words of the great American football coach Vince Lombardi. He said, and I quote, "It is time for all of us to stand and cheer for the doer, the achiever, the one who recognizes the challenges and does something about it." The two motions of the 24 of you have put forth that you are indeed doers and achievers. The first motion is the restriction on the high cost of housing and implementation of a land and housing purchase license for non-Caymanians, and is a very, as the speaker has already noted, a very topical topic, and I wish you well in taking on that debate on either side. I thank the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Rion Porter, the elected member for Georgetown South, for moving the motion. The youth government is bringing a sexual harassment bill 2022, moved by the Honorable Premier, Mr. Shankar Paul Rosh. The motion and this bill show that you indeed have your finger on the pulse of the Cayman Islands. It is even a bit eerie because there is also not a day that goes by in caucus and in the halls of the government administration building that we don't discuss the issue of affordable housing for our people and what we propose to do about it. As for your sexual harassment bill, my government actually has one in train, as Mr. Speaker has alluded to, which should come to these hallowed halls very soon. I'll pause from the Premier's remarks and just make a personal interjection that I couldn't be more proud of that work when it comes forward to the House. I had previously worked on it in my capacity as Deputy Chief Officer of Community Affairs, and it is a bill that, in my view, is well overdue. Back to the Premier's remarks. I thank Youth Parliament Premier from St. Ignatius, the Youth Parliament Leader of the Opposition, Mr. George Green from Cayman Prep, and the Speaker, Ms. Shakira McPherson, for their service and leadership of the group. All of you come from a variety of schools, not only in the Cayman Islands, but also from the University of Sussex and Florida Tech. Thank you for your service. I understand your ages range from 14 to 24. Your ages mean that you have seen a lot in the world in your relatively short lives. Not only have you had to live with COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions, while still finding ways to effectively learn. Many of you have experienced the mental toll that isolation from the world can take as we watch the coronavirus spread throughout the world. While we have watched for many years the unrest in the Middle East, I do not think we were expecting another country in this day and age to invade its neighbor and cause so much destruction and death. Life can, at times, seem senseless, but don't let the world or even local events jade you. Through this exercise and other experiences in your life, you are going to be prepared to inherit the world that my generation is leaving behind. We are doing our best to leave a legacy of sustainability and a strong foundation, and we hope that motivates you to build upon us as we have on our forefathers. The actions you have taken so far to be here today give me comfort in knowing that you care about the things that are sustainable, that will allow our country and indeed our world to endure, not just for the next generation, but for future generations. In fact, your motion and bill directly address 5 of the UN's 17 sustainable goals, the SDGs. No poverty, good health and well-being, gender equality, reduced inequalities, and sustainable cities and communities. I believe you are setting a firm foundation for a brighter future, one that might even find you back in this parliament as an elected member of government. To break from the Premier's remarks, Michael, that might pertain to you, I suspect. Maybe the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Back to the Premier's remarks. I believe you will have a responsibility and opportunity beyond anything my generation has ever known. As I told the 2021 class of youth parliamentarians, my political career has been built on the generations that came before me. A long line of family members who were public servants. That realization was confirmed after I became Premier in 2021 and was standing on Panton Street at a public function. As I looked around, I already knew was firmly placed in my heart. I am indeed privileged to come from those who went before me, who put service above self. Today's youth parliament process showed members of the government and the opposition coming together to teach our future leaders how parliament works and how helping our students prepare for their debates and presentations. I thank those members, in particular Deputy Speaker, for that dedication. You yourselves have taken the first step by putting in the time and the effort to make this day a success. And the rest of the government certainly appreciates your participation today. I thank the staff of the Parliament and the other men and women behind Youth Parliament who have shepherded you through this process and made today possible. To those who are here to observe these proceedings, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to turn these distinguished chambers over to the assembly of articulate and intelligent young people and to declare the 15th Youth Parliament of the Cayman Islands officially opened. Thank you. End quote from the Premier. As a short personal conclusion, I would also like to echo what the Leader of the Opposition says. I don't know if any of you are nervous. I can share with you from my perspective that every time I take my seat, I am always nervous. Because it's a awe-inspiring moment to know that you have been elected to marshal a position, to be able to craft conclusions and shape the future on behalf of your people. It is an awesome power that you all in mock fashion are displaying today. So feel no way about your nerves. It'll be natural. But if any of my experience can help to take a page from my book, once you get started and that blood gets going and that fire in you is lit, I promise you your nerves will go away and your parents will be proud. God bless you all.
This Honorable 15th Youth Parliament is now in session. I will ask the Honorable Premier to say prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, We beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of this 15th Youth Parliament of the Cayman Islands now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and the surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honour, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the youth parliamentarians participating in this youth parliament, that they may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of their high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in the heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please be seated.
Reading of messages and announcements by the speaker.
A pleasant morning to you all. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Cayman Islands 15th Youth Parliament. I would first like to express the honor it is to uphold this essential role as Speaker of the House. Today, March 14th, 2022, is Commonwealth Day, which is the annual celebration of the brotherhood of some 57 Commonwealth countries. The theme for this year's Commonwealth Day is delivering a common future. Now, as you will appreciate, the diversity of 57 countries all over the world would be enormous. However, what they all have in common is that they are a part of the Commonwealth. And what I imagine was Her Majesty the Queen's desire when she chose this theme is that all countries engage in connecting, transforming, and innovating their countries for the betterment of their citizens. We have been fortunate in that our government has not failed in implementing ways to protect and unite the people of Cayman, improving our way of life. Through their creative methods to better the lives of the people of Cayman, the government has allowed us to connect. This country is comprised of many people of various nationalities. The government has made it safe for this diverse population to visit loved ones, go to work, attend school, and even gather here today to witness the hard work of these dedicated and determined young people who sit before you now. The excellent example set by our government has enabled the students in this honorable youth parliament to innovate, connect, and transform. Here today are individuals representing different schools and nationalities. Although we have our differences, we are united. We as youth parliamentarians have grown closer together by working tirelessly on the two topics that will be brought forward. And through connecting, we have worked diligently to ensure a successful debate today. Having noticed the issues within our society, The youth parliamentarians of this honorable House aim to create and change laws and regulations to combat such issues. Because of this process, we have transformed our views and opinions. The bill in motion brought forth to this honorable House by my fellow youth parliamentarians aim to achieve such goals. We, as young people, have witnessed problems that have potential to severely affect Cayman and its future. Therefore, we, as youth parliamentarians, believe that it is of utmost importance that these issues are discussed so that Cayman can become a better place, a safer place for our generation and the generations that follow. I look forward to a lively debate on the two topics chosen by the youth parliamentarians. Thank you.
Government business, bills. First reading, Sexual Harassment Bill, 2022.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time and is now set down for second reading.
Second reading, Sexual Harassment Bill, 2022.
I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move a motion to suspend Standing Order 32-4.
The motion put forward is that Standing Order 32-4 be suspended to permit members to read from their speeches. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move a bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Premier wish to speak to the bill?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to present the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022. Madam Speaker, today is a day that some people have been waiting for 16 long years, as work on legislation to tackle sexual harassment began in 2005, and the bill was even published by the Law Reform Commission in 2013, but was never passed through Parliament. So, Madam Speaker, I take immense pride in presenting this bill in the House today. I take pride in presenting this bill which will make our schools free of sexual harassment, our offices free of sexual harassment, and essentially our streets free of sexual harassment. So, Madam Speaker, this is a bill that will make our country as a whole safer. Madam Speaker, as stated in the bill, when this bill is passed, sexual harassment would become a criminal offense and would carry a maximum penalty of a fine of $5,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 5 years or to both. With this, what the government wants to instill in potential criminals is fear. A fear that this disgusting behavior of sexual harassment will not be tolerated in our country. Madam Speaker, anyone in their right state of mind will know that this behavior isn't right and that it is evil. But of course, we have the criminal minority who continue to sexually harass children, classmates, and colleagues. And what this bill will do is justice and consequence. Madam Speaker, there has to be serious consequences for committing the appalling act of sexual harassment. And Madam Speaker, we have the very minority, the worst amongst the criminals, ruthless and heartless thugs who sexually harass children. And for those thugs, the only thing they deserve is a tougher sentence. A criminal who has committed an act of sexual harassment against a student is liable to a fine of $10,000 or to an imprisonment for a term of 6 years or to both. Madam Speaker, the laws that are already in place are not adequate to properly deal with sexual harassment. Other laws, such as the gender equality law, the domestic violence law, are used to deal with sexual harassment and subsequently prosecute offenders. Madam Speaker, this government believes that when a person commits the offence of sexual harassment, their conviction must also be for sexual harassment. The offender's conviction should not be for either gender inequality or for domestic violence. Madam Speaker, a survey conducted by Cayman Compass found that 90% of those who responded faced some form of inappropriate sexual conduct. Madam Speaker, to come to know this fact was just so appalling and disturbing, and this shows that the issue of sexual harassment is very widespread in our country and that it does need to be addressed. Madam Speaker, one of our people who was sexually harassed in broad daylight stated on a Cayman Compass article, and I quote, "It makes me scared to leave the house now. It makes me scared to go to a public place. I always thought of Cayman as a safe place. It does not feel so safe anymore for me to raise a child." End quote. Madam Speaker, the lady's sense of security has been irreversibly damaged. And is this what our beloved Cayman Islands, is this the beloved Cayman Islands we want to portray? And is this the Cayman kindness we preach and pride ourselves about? Madam Speaker, our country, our people, the Caymanian people are the kindest, the most resilient, and the warmest people that anyone can meet. And this bill, Madam Speaker, seeks to reinstall the Cayman kind and the Caymanian spirit by making people feel safe again, by making people feel safe enough to leave the house, by making people feel safe enough to go to a public place. Madam Speaker, one of my constituents wrote to me saying, "These thugs know that they can get away with this disgusting behavior, and this is because of the lack of legislation for sexual harassment. And that is the same reason why hundreds of people have to put up with this behavior." End quote. Madam Speaker, this government hears people. The people of our country have noticed the lack of sexual harassment laws, and we, the government, by bringing this bill, are acting for the people of our country. Madam Speaker, sexual harassment affects a victim's emotional health to such an extent that it becomes much harder for the victim to even...
Honorable Premier, your time is up.
Could I please have an extension?
You may.
Madam Speaker, sexual harassment affects a victim's emotional health to such an extent sometimes that it becomes much harder for the victim to even carry out daily tasks. The emotional aspects will later be explained by my honourable friend, the Minister for Health and the Minister for Home Affairs. Madam Speaker, our Parliament has to stand together in unity to recognise that the issue of sexual harassment is real and that it has affected thousands of people, and that this is the time for action. And this is not the time for cheap political games and sniping from the sidelines, but to stand united against the cruel plague of sexual harassment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, did you know? Did you know that nearly 3 in 4 sexual harassment claims in the workplace go unreported? That 55% of victims experience retaliation after speaking up? That 31% of sexual harassment or assault victims felt anxious or depressed afterward? Sexual harassment has left a ginormous mark on the lives of victims and has especially affected their mental health. Madam Speaker, I stand here today as your Minister of Health and Wellness to address the issue of sexual harassment And as the Minister of Health and Wellness, it is my job to ensure that this issue is brought to an immediate halt. To do so, we mustn't pretend like sexual harassment is a joke or something to be played with. We must act, and we must act now. Referring to Sexual Harassment Bill 2022, Part 3, Clause 11 states,
I recognize the elected member for East End.
Thank you. I'm just a point of order, please.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is to ask for evidence to prove these statements. The honorable member stated some statistics and they weren't referenced. May we please have evidence for that?
Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness, do you have the supporting documentation?
for that specific statement, I do not. It's on my computer. However, I do not have the physical evidence.
Elected member for East End.
I withdraw my statement.
Okay. Honorable Minister, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Referring to Sexual Harassment Bill 2022, Part 3, Clause 11 states that the bill provides for the offense of intimidating a complainant who is an employee or third party. Intimidate, bully, harass. All these words technically mean the same thing. We all know of the effects of bullying, and many people have died because of it. An offender intimidating a victim is no different. When a person is sexually harassed, they are belittled, disrespected, and made to feel unvaluable. And to put the icing on the cake, they're told to keep their mouth shut or something bad will happen. Quid pro quo, Madam Speaker, literally meaning what for what, is a phrase to express the exchange of goods or services in which one transfer is contingent upon the other. Or in terms of sexual harassment, I'll do this if you let me do this. I'll promote you if you let me touch you. I'll give you better office space if you let me take you out. No, I didn't ask if you had a husband or a boyfriend. If you don't do this, you're fired. This for that. This type of sexual harassment is common in the workplace. Employees' jobs are threatened unless they give in. Sexual favors from an employee or job candidate as an employment condition. It should be noted that persons who have the authority to hire, fire, or promote can commit quid pro quo. So I ask the opposition, Madam Speaker, why should they be against this bill? Employers are harassing their staff and getting away with it, forcing, threatening, intimidating employees to do these things which cannot be mentioned, or else they lose their jobs which they need to live. Oh, and Madam Speaker, let's not forget about the hostile work environments. Work environments where someone purposely discriminates other people because of their gender, race, color, or religion. Unwelcomed fondling, sexually suggestive remarks and photos, and the use of sexual language are all ingredients that can create this hostile work environment. An article written by licensed psychotherapist Allison Abrams states, research over the past 20 years has associated toxic work environments with increased depression, substance use, and health issues among employees. Further research has shown that organizations are suffering as well. Some of these adverse effects include decreased productivity, lower levels of employee commitment, and increased turnover. We can see how sexual harassment, and this article shows us that hostility in the workplace is affecting our citizens' mental health and can also affect the economy. But I'll leave that for the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development to discuss. Madam Speaker, I'll let the facts speak for themselves. It is quite clear that sexual harassment is and will continue to affect our people's mental health and physical health unless we do something about it. As the Honorable Premier stated a few days ago, right across the street, one of our citizens, a woman, a mother with her child, I might add, was sexually assaulted in broad daylight. In her over-the-phone interview with the Cayman Compass, she mentioned that she always felt safe here in Cayman, but unfortunately after that incident, I'm sure that the safe image she now had has been destroyed.
I recognize the elected member for East End.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is to ask for some physical evidence to prove her statement.
Which statement?
Your statement in relation to your articles.
I have the physical evidence with me, Madam Speaker.
Sergeant at Arms, could you bring it to me, please?
It's highlighted in yellow.
The evidence does support her statement about the toxic environment in resulting in decreased productivity.
Madam Speaker, may I please see this physical evidence?
Yes, you may. Honorable Minister, you may continue your speech.
It is also highlighted in yellow. Madam Speaker, may I continue? Thank you. She said, and I quote, "I felt so alone and helpless." Madam Speaker, Maslow's hierarchy of needs states that we need safety to survive. This lady's safety has now been stripped from her, and now she lives in fear of being assaulted again. Madam Speaker, I can assure you that living in fear is not good for your mental health. Living in an age where mental health issues are now coming to light, I ask the opposition to also consider the mental health of these victims and vote yes to this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to speak on the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022. The recurring issue of sexual harassment is present in homes, schools, in the workplace, and in the public. It knows no boundaries, it knows no age, it knows no class or creed. These acts hold no bias against gender or sexual orientation. Madam Speaker, the goal of the Sexual Harassment Bill is to establish clear and specific definitions of acts and widen the scope of protection for all. In the Gender Equality Law 2011, the Penal Code 2019, the Stalking Civil Jurisdiction Law 2018, the Public Service Management Law 2013, and the Personal Regulations Law 2013 provide some definition and protection, but which are limited and insufficient in their scope of coverage. So, Madam Speaker, though we have made strides to our legislation, within the public and private sector, there remain gray areas. The Gender Equality Act 2011, Part 2, the Protection Against Gender Discrimination, Clause 7, Subclause 4, aims for the protection against sexual harassment in employment agencies and in the workplace. However, Madam Speaker, to successfully apply offenses relating to sexual harassment in Subclause 4, it must first subject to the Act to Subclause 3, where the act must be perceived as a conduct of sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, perception is a state of mind. We are held at individual standards. Madam Speaker, Section 88A of the Penal Code 2019 outlines a definition of intentional harassment, which is an umbrella approach to acts and conducts of harassment of any kind, but which does not include any specific definition of sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, the intentional burden of proof, in addition to the proximity rule, provides for too many circumstantial events, which enables perpetrators to hide within the scope of this clause. Madam Speaker, Clause 45A and B of the Penal Code 2019 revision provides for specific prevention of sexual offenses brought before the courts. However, Madam Speaker, some acts of sexual harassment offenses may be overlooked in the lack of the clear definition. Madam Speaker, Clause 133 of the Penal Code provides clear definition and protection of sexual harassment, but which is limited as it specifically speaks to the female gender alone. Madam Speaker, our legislation for today and future should not be inclusive to eliminate all aspects of gender discrimination. Clause 155 of the Penal Code and Clause 3, Subclause 2 of the Stalking Civil Jurisdiction Law 2018 provide some clear definition and protection against stalking, which are the most progressive amendments of legislations. However, Madam Speaker, there's no definition of what acts and conduct of sexual harassment could be within the interpretation of Section 155 of the Penal Code 2019 revision and Clause 3, Subclause 2 of the Stalking Civil Jurisdiction Law. Madam Speaker, Section 9, 10, 11, 21, and 22 of the Personal Regulations Law does not include definitions or acts or conduct that can be used to apply to any procedure in determining acts of misconduct or criminal activities surrounding sexual harassment by an elected member or a member of the civil service. Madam Speaker, as is evident, definitions that do exist are limited and are ambiguous, and which depreciates our government's ability of good governance for the civil service. Madam Speaker, the solution presented in the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022 addresses these inadequacies and inefficacies of current legislations that are now being put forward in the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022. Where the Sexual Harassment Bill seeks to, 1, provide a clear and precise definition of acts and conducts of sexual harassment for criminalization, which is a streamlined and equitable tool which enables structured security and governance for the people of the Cayman Islands. 2, the bill seeks to mandate inclusive policies in educational institutions and in the workplace, which will hold employers at high standards of accountability in the protection for all employees against acts and conducts of sexual harassment among small, medium, and large institutions, whether public or private. Remove gender discrimination in application of the definition of acts and conducts of sexual harassment. Establish a sexual harassment tribunal.
Honorable Attorney General, your time is up.
Madam Speaker, may I ask for an additional minute to continue my speech?
You may.
Thank you. Establish a sexual harassment tribunal. Extend the requirement of the sexual harassment policy within educational institutions to students that will further enhance initiatives such as anti-bullying and safeguarding of children against acts and conducts of sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, as we take part in the celebration of the World Commonwealth Day today, let us showcase first world and progressive leadership by introducing the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022 in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, it is crucial that this bill is introduced into legislation as it will result in more equitable convictions and for the coverage of our democracy from those who transgress the set revisions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, any form of detrimental sexual harassment is, in my opinion, reprehensible. This is something that I imagine everybody in this House firmly agrees with. However, there is a not so fine line between what is and what is not sexual harassment when regarding the verbal aspect. How does one determine between compliments and aggressive provocation? I think that this bill, although has good intent, undermines itself in its failings to recognize this. Madam Speaker, Part 2, Subclause 1b of this bill states that sexual harassment is when an individual makes an unwelcome sexual comment to another person. But where do you draw the line between a harmless compliment and a reprehensible remark? there is an unarguable uncertainty created by the inadequacy of their definition. Their definition does not state a definitive line between what is and what is not sexual harassment. Because of this, we believe that people will be afraid to exercise their fundamental human right of freedom of speech. Madam Speaker, there is a difficulty with criminalizing sexually harassing behaviors, like they wish to do so, in places such as the workplace. As I said earlier, this is because, in places such as the workplace, it is difficult to decide what should be deemed offensive and what should not be, especially in multicultural environments like our Cayman Islands. A great example of this would be that some women of Muslim faith avoid shaking hands for historical cultural reasons. If a colleague or client on repeated occasions insists on shaking the hand of a woman they know does not want to, would this be classed as harassment? There is not a definitive yes or no to this question. It is hard to draw a line. There was a similar case that took place in the United Kingdom. A decision was made by Raj Capita Business Services Limited, which raised questions
I
about...
recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, does the elected member have any documents of this?
Madam
Point of
Speaker-
order, sorry.
Madam Speaker, yes, I do.
May I see them, please?
Madam Speaker, do you wish to see data regarding women of Islamic faith or Raj Capita Business Services Limited?
Both, preferably. Honorable Leader of Opposition, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, a decision was made by Raj Capita Business Services Limited, which raised questions about whether certain conduct was of a sexual nature or related to sex for the purposes of discrimination. In this case, there was a male employee who brought forward a harassment claim against a female employee who repeatedly massaged his shoulders. The Employment Appeal Tribunal dismissed the claim on the grounds that the behavior was not of a sexual nature. Now, many would argue that this was in fact sexual harassment. However, the tribunal was unable to prosecute this claim because of its small set of rules were technically not violated, despite that arguably a sexual harassment occurred. That is why this bill is flawed. Where do you draw the line? Another issue I have with this bill is that it is technically in violation of Article 19 of the Declaration of Human Rights. Article 19 protects your right to hold your own opinions and to express them freely without government interference. This bill infringes upon this. Freedom of speech and expression means the right to express one's own
I
opinions
recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, points of elucidation.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, do you give way?
I do not.
Please continue your speech.
Freedom of speech and expression means the right to express one's own opinions freely by means of words, writing, printing, or any other mode. It is now widely accepted that the right to freedom of speech is the core of free society and must be protected at all times. Instead of attempting to resolve the important issue of sexual harassment, this bill attempts to introduce a system that will fail to determine not only what is and is not sexual harassment, but will also penalize and punish individuals who violate this. This means that the government will control what is and is not offensive, and therefore regulate our speech. How terrifying. Madam Speaker, this is not the first time that a country has attempted to introduce such a law which led to its inevitable failure. An example where a similar type of anti-harassment law has been introduced would be in the United States of America, Pennsylvania. It was found that universities with good intentions can go too far in addressing the problem of harassment. In 2001, a federal district court overturned a Pennsylvania school district's anti-harassment policy because it was overly restrictive of student speech. Preventing harassment does not require unnecessary restriction of free speech, like this bill wishes to implement. Madam Speaker, a study headed by Professor Atwater following the Me Too movement and the consequential attempts to stricken sexual
Honorable
harassment.
Leader of the Opposition, your time is up.
Madam Speaker, may I have one more minute to finish?
You may.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A study headed by the Professor Atwater following the Me Too movement and the consequential attempts to stricken sexual harassment laws found
I
that
recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
May I please say, or point of order, may I please see documentation of this evidence?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I can provide documentation.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you may continue your speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sexual harassment laws were found. A study headed by Professor Atwater following the Me Too movement and the consequential attempts to stricken sexual harassment laws found that poor harassment laws, such as this one, lead to 16% of men and 11% of women said that they were reluctant to hire attractive women. 15% of men and 15% of women agreed with the statement they would be unwilling to recruit women for jobs involving close interpersonal interactions with men. And 41% of men said that they now avoided one-on-one meetings with female colleagues when no one else was present. Madam Speaker, this is important because it seems like the consequences of this bill could harm certain rights and liberties of women in their progression of the workplace and in the general goal of gender equality. Madam Speaker, to conclude, the problem I have with this bill is that I fear that because of the unarguable uncertainty created by the inadequacy of their definition, people will be afraid to exercise their fundamental human right of freedom of speech, but as well as this, be afraid because they are unaware what does and does not constitute sexual harassment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022. Part 3 of the bill deals with mandating the implementation of sexual harassment policies in the workplace and the scope of such policies. In an article published by the Cayman Compass on 15th June 2021, it reported that 200 women and a handful of men were interviewed and 5 stories of sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace in Cayman were given. Madam Speaker, the article stated harassment in the workplace, including sexual propositions from bosses or managers, was a common complaint. Several women said they were made to feel as if their career success depended on how they responded in those situations. Others said they felt uncomfortable at work because of crude comments, stories, and unwanted advances. When they complained, the behavior was dismissed as a joke. Madam Speaker, this is straight from the article.
I recognize the elected member for Newlands.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Does this member have evidence, physical evidence, to support his claims?
I do.
Honorable Minister, could you please provide the evidence? Honorable Minister, please continue your speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the workplace sexual harassment statistics are outrageous. In a survey done by the Cayman Compass, 144 people claim that they face sexual harassment, but 60% did not report the incident. Only around 15% told their employer, and less than 15% of those that did make a report were even satisfied with how the complaint was handled. And a third of those that responded said that they were the ones that faced consequences. Madam Speaker, can you imagine that? A third of the people that reported it, were the ones that faced consequences. Imagine that you are a victim of sexual harassment, and when you reported it, you were the one that faced repercussions. Madam Speaker, this is appalling. This is why the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022 needs to be passed, as we want all victims to feel comfortable to report to their employer. Madam Speaker, Clause 7 provides for the duty of an employer to formulate a sexual harassment policy for implementation in the workplace. This will create a standardization across all workplaces in Cayman Islands to ensure a consistent approach in dealing with and preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. Not all employers have sexual harassment policies in place, and the ones that do have, at the end of the day, the way that employee is dealt with is up to the employer, or in many cases, not even dealt with at all. Madam Speaker, if sexual harassment is allowed to thrive in the workplace, it is a no-win situation. Employers will experience poor employee morale, low productivity, and potential lawsuits. This will ultimately affect the success of the business. Madam Speaker, in a March 2019 report done by Deloitte, workplace sexual harassment costs an average of $2.6 billion in loss of productivity, or $1,052 per victim. For the employee, this seriously impacts their mental health, as they no longer feel safe in that type of environment and may feel threatened for their life and even their job. Madam Speaker, as the Minister responsible for social development, I support the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022 as it is a step in the right direction to guarantee a safe and productive workplace for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Cayman Brac East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Beauty provokes harassment. However, it looks through the eyes of those who commit sexual harassment when deciding what provokes it. That comes from the Beauty Myth, 1990, by Naomi Wolf. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022. The World Health Organization depicts sexual harassment as any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person, regardless of their relationship to the victim, in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. Madam Speaker, sexual harassment is now one of the world's ongoing epidemics, and unfortunately, also one of the Cayman Islands. The Sexual Harassment Bill 2022, drafted by this government, seeks to eradicate this redundant issue. Sexual harassment is taken into serious consideration in the majority of countries, whether it occurs in the workplace or not. The United States of America, Germany, South Africa, Canada, the United Kingdom, more than 150 countries have already laid certain laws to attempt an end to forms of sexual harassment against men, women, or both within their borders. However,
I recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the honourable member have data present to back up his claims?
Is that a point of order or a point of elucidation?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I do have that information. Madam Speaker, I do have several copies, one for you and the opposition. And that information can be found circled in pencil.
Elected member, please continue your speech.
As I was saying, Madam Speaker, however, even though it is a common occurrence within the boundaries of the Cayman Islands, not even sexual harassment on the borderline of sexual assault is considered a criminal offense here. Again, according to statistical figures provided by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence and supported by the Cayman Islands' very own crisis center, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men worldwide experience harassment with sexual intent or some form of physical violence by an intimate partner, or in shortened terms, simply sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, I do not only believe, but concerning the outcries of the people of our country, the surveying and crowdsourcing conducted by credited sources like Cayman Compass, I know that it is time to stop looking down or away from the problem that is sexual harassment. This bill aims to criminalize forms of sexual harassment in not only the workplace, but in general across our 3 islands. Madam Speaker, the truth is, the beloved people of this country have little to say on certain controversial topics, including sexual harassment. When was the last time we've heard anything major going on around this topic? Moreover, the sad realities of the Cayman Islands is that issues on the same level of seriousness or somewhat related to sexual harassment are not typically talked about in the open. They are discussed and dealt with behind closed doors. So wait, how can the Cayman Islands benefit, prosper, improve for the better, maintain our Cayman kind culture if problems such as sexual harassment are not addressed? It cannot. How are the lovely people of this country going to deal with or are currently dealing with this growing cancer of such gross and disgusting behavior? On Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021, the news source Cayman Compass produced another beautifully crafted article. According to the Compass, the article states that even the police believe sexual harassment is significantly underreported in the Cayman Islands.
Madam Speaker, point of order, please. I'd like to see the evidence.
Madam Speaker, I have the evidence.
Madam Speaker, I also have evidence that can support the honourable member's motion.
You may give it to the sergeant at arms.
Once again, Madam Speaker, I have multiple documents.
My apologies, Madam Speaker, if I might interject. The document I provided is statistics provided by the United Nations Women, and the statistics which prove that cases of sexual harassment are underreported in the Cayman Islands, which determines the need for the sexual harassment bill. With these statistics, it's not only statistics in the local region here in Cayman, but also international.
Elected member, you may continue your speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. According to the Compass, the article states that even the police believe sexual harassment is significantly underreported in the Cayman Islands. Apparently, in response to the previous year, only 13 offenses were recorded. Madam Speaker, how are we going to achieve a more safe and more sustainable country? Will our children, the future generation, be ensured to be kept out of harm's way? These presented questions give this government reason to push forward with a bill against forms of sexual harassment. Included in the same previously mentioned article, the Compass wrote, and I quote, "Though dozens of women and some men came forward to share stories as part of a Cayman Compass series on the issue, officers say it is relatively rare for these reports to reach the police. That is partly because some of the incidents are
Elected
not..."
member for Cayman Rockies, your time is up.
Madam Speaker, can I have an extension of 1 minute, please?
You may.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is partly because some of the incidents are not criminal. End quote. Let's repeat that. Because some of the incidents are not criminal. Of all people, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service agreed and stated that the majority of reports do not reach police attention because sexual harassment in general is not a criminal offense. Not a criminal offense yet, because this government sexual harassment bill will ensure general forms of sexual harassment are indeed criminalized. Madam Speaker, fellow members of Parliament, fellow people of this country, this is the truth, this is the outcome, and this is the best it is going to get. But from now on, only worse. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for East End.
I would first like to thank Madam Speaker for allowing me the opportunity of speaking before you today. Being able to investigate such issues such as sexual harassment in our islands, as well as others, has been a privilege. As the opposition, I would like to start by saying that we wholeheartedly acknowledge that sexual harassment is an overlooked issue. Today, I will be highlighting the following points: the importance of the penal code and its referencing, and as well as this, the importance of definitions in such a bill. As to my first point, in Part 3 of Clause 2, Subclause F, it is stated that the employer should take quote-unquote disciplinary measures as the employer finds appropriate. This implies a wide discretion for employers while they are using their discretion in relation to said clause. It is most important that words such as this one should be defined. Madam Speaker, it is paramount that disciplinary measures should be defined to avoid ambiguity with the employer. In relation to this point, Part 5, Clause 6 does not explicitly reference the penal code in relation to the evidence before the tribunal. Madam Speaker, such referencing is essential to avoiding cross-contamination and mishandling of evidence. Say, for example, there were to be a case where evidence was not handled correctly and the employer of the respondent took quote-unquote disciplinary action towards the respondent. This would be a complete misuse of the law that has already been put in place, the Penal Code. Madam Speaker, if the government cannot provide us with a necessary reason as to why the Penal Code, something that has been worked on by many different people in their ministries, is not being explicitly referenced in a law of their creation.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Can I, or Madam Speaker, point of order? May I see that documentation of that point on the Penal Code?
Unfortunately, I do not have that document with me. However, the government should have their knowledge on the Penal Code.
Elected member.
Madam Speaker, if they cannot provide that evidence, will the member please retract that statement?
Elected member for East End.
No.
Please continue your speech.
I will continue. Thank you. If the government cannot provide us with a necessary reason as to why the Penal Code, something that has been worked on by many different people in their ministries, is not being explicitly referenced in a law of their creation, why are they planning to print it to the public? After all laws are available to any person who wishes.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
I recognize the elected member for West Bay North.
In regards to the member for East End, is that correct? The respective member East End is questioned as to why the government has not specifically quoted or related to the Penal Code in this bill. But if I may refer the member to look at the front page of this bill, it says, a bill for an act to criminalize sexual harassment, to require employers, educational institutions to formulate a sexual harassment policy, to establish a sexual harassment tribunal, and for incidental and connected purposes. In regards to incidental and connected purposes, that is in regards to the Penal Code. And if I may further elaborate, Madam Speaker, with the drafting of this bill, Madam Speaker, may I continue?
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, please be seated. And continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When this bill was drafted, it was sent to the respective members, and I believe the Hansard Department who assisted with this bill. They reviewed our bill, provided comments for our bill, related other laws to this bill. So as it is in regards to the question of the Penal Code, that statement should be retracted. Perhaps on the top of this bill, it relates to such statement. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Elected member for East End.
I would like to state that I do not retract my statement, as the public would not be aware of that. It is not explicitly stated.
Madam Speaker, point of order.
Elected member for West Bay North.
I respect the member from East End's drive and fury passion of not retracting their statement. However, in the general sense, we cannot always expect our public to know the laws. That is up to their choice if they want to know the laws. Unfortunately, in some cases, they only know the laws if they get in trouble with such laws. So with that, there's a reason why in this bill, we have a section that relates to education
Elected
to inform
member
our
for
public.
West Bay North.
Yes, ma'am.
The elected member for East End is stating that it is not explicitly stated in the bill that it is referencing the Penal Code, so I will ask her to continue her speech and not retract her statement.
Thank you. As I continue, Madam Speaker, not everyone here today is accustomed to learning about certain laws that need background understanding, as this honorable member has previously stated. And this does not make the public ignorant, as it is not their job unless they are in an occupation which requires them to know about the Penal Code. Their government, our government, Madam Speaker, is meant to have provided them with that knowledge to deepen their understanding on complex issues surrounding criminal law and its relation to sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, can the government assure us that such definition, as well as others, will not plant the seed of negative and unnecessary issues within our community when handling these cases? And that such evidence will be handled correctly under the laws that they have already created? We have to ask ourselves these questions, Madam Speaker, as the government is being seemingly more reactive than proactive. I would like to close with the reinforcement of the fact that sexual harassment is acknowledged by the opposition in the workplace and in any other circumstance. However, definitions must be unequivocally defined. And as well as this, the penal code must be referenced, as our government is meant to have provided the public with necessary information for them to understand certain laws. Our government is responsible for creating an act that is neither within the employees' or employers' favor, but rather out of rationality and fairness, as these virtues are what our islands were founded on. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Newlands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would now like to bring to your attention the government's sexual harassment bill. Now, the topic of sexual harassment is one that is very controversial and topical. Especially in the Cayman Islands, we need to have regulations like these in place to protect our citizens. But who is to say that these regulations are not already in place? That being said, this government has shown its apparent ignorance to the current acts and regulations that are already in place.
I recognize the Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of order. Decorum. Can the member please take back that statement?
Elected member, please retract your statement and maintain decorum.
I would like to know what statement she is referring to.
Can you please repeat the last sentence of your speech?
That being said, this government has shown its apparent ignorance to the current acts and regulations that are already in place to prevent sexual harassment.
Can the member please retract that statement?
I will not retract my statement.
Elected member, please refrain from using words such as calling the government ignorant in your speech, but you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the opposition's eyes, this bill will do nothing but clog up the system. To start, the Law Reform Commission's Sexual Harassment Bill 2013, which might I add was not passed, is a great example of this clog, as it seems as if this government has copied and pasted specific sections from this previous bill into their current bill. An example of this is Clause 3 of the Law Reform Commission's Sexual Harassment Bill, which directly corresponds to Clause 3 of this government Sexual Harassment Bill. Madam Speaker, for Part 2, Subclause A through to F, it only seems as if this government did not even change the wording of the specific sections, but as I previously said, copied and pasted it into this bill. Madam Speaker, I have to ask, if this was such a great and needed bill, why wasn't it implemented by the government of 2013? Obviously, they would have realized that this bill would have created a clog in the long run. Madam Speaker, they would have realized that with the acts and regulations that are already in place, this bill would seem unnecessary and irrelevant.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, can the member please provide evidence for the member to state that there are already laws in place?
Is that a point of order or a point of
order? Sorry.
Yes, Madam Speaker, but I will get to that in the rest of my speech. May I continue?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, my question then is, if this government would have done their research and known that this bill already existed, why bother include it in this bill? This again shows perhaps the lack of leadership and incompetence of this government. Madam Speaker, I have to ask if this is really the government that's supposed to be leading us. Because how can we be led by such an unplanned, unprepared government as this? As I previously...
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of elucidation.
Elected member for Newlands, do you give way?
No, I do not.
Please continue your speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I previously stated, this seems to be a poorly researched bill, as there are already things in place to prevent and penalize sexual harassment. I turn your attention to the Penal Code 2022 revision.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of order. Repetition.
Elected member for Newlands, you're repeating what was previously stated, so please get to the point.
I'll get to the point. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I turn your attention to the Penal Code 2022 revision, specifically speaking to Section 88A and 88B, which speaks to harassment, alarm, and distress. Now, I know the first thing that may come up is the fact that harassment and sexual harassment are different, but in fact, they're not. Sexual harassment is a form or type of harassment, so it's still applicable to this section. Again, Madam Speaker, we see the rather lack of research done by this government. This section of the Penal Code reveals to us that there are already things in place to punish or criminalize sexual harassment.
I recognize the Honorable Attorney General.
May I interject, Madam Speaker?
Pardon?
Interjection. Point of order, sorry. The Penal Code states, has an umbrella approach to conducts that add up, but this bill specifically defines conducts that amount to sexual harassment, which is not detailed in the Penal Code, Section 88A.
In response to that, I am saying that obviously the government would have not made it specific to sexual harassment in order to cover the wide spectrum of harassment and sexual harassment. So what you're saying is rather irrelevant. May I continue?
Madam Speaker, point of elucidation.
Do you give way, elected member for Newlands?
I do not.
Continue your speech, please.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this clog will soon seem impossible to flush if this bill is put in place. Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, points of order. Can the member provide evidence for the clogging of the system or whatever the member is talking about?
Elected member for Newlands, can you provide the evidence to support your statement?
Well, Premier, forgive me. If you are listening to my speech, I have already provided evidence of this clog. And I'm not saying that the clog is literal. I'm saying that it is a figurative clog. If you would have just listened to the statement that I just made, I said that it would be impossible to flush, referring it to a literal toilet.
Elected member, please continue your speech.
Thank you. Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, point of order. All members.
Elected member, there's been too many points of order raised. I will ask the elected member for Newlands to continue her speech. If you have something to add, you can give it to the next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if we say yes to this bill, we'll be putting ourselves 6 feet under, not only as a legal system, but as a country. Furthermore, legal aids like RCIPS will also fall victim of this clog, as they'll have reports of sexual harassment coming in every second due to vagueness of terms in this bill. This bill will only cause confusion, not only in the area of Parliament, but to others in our communities, because they'll not know where to turn or what is most relevant. Is it this bill or is it the government penal code? Even in the matter of sentencing, judges will be confused as to what charge the perpetrator will receive. Again, causing a confusion within our people and authorities. As much as I believe that sexual harassment is a punishable deed, the government needs to get its facts straight and actually do their research before they come to confuse not only themselves, but others. In closing, Madam Speaker, even though sexual harassment is a problem everywhere, it is obvious that Cayman has put policies and acts in place to prevent and penalize it. Therefore, I implore this government to rethink this bill and ensure that they have done their research and planning before we end up in a clogged situation. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Town West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my contribution to this bill won't be very long, as we as a government believe that this Sexual Harassment Bill 2022 should be passed in this honorable House for the protection of everyone. Madam Speaker, I will be dealing with educational institutions and why this sexual harassment bill should be passed to not only protect adults in general, but the youth in our educational institution, as we strongly believe that the children are the future of this country. And we need to protect our future at all costs. That is why we were voted in as the government. Schools should be a safe place where students can learn. It is essential that students feel secure with their classmates, teachers, and members of staff. As a student myself, I should arrive at the school feeling safe and protected, not worrying about potential offenders. Madam Speaker, to think that sexual harassment happens in the Cayman Islands and there still isn't a law to specifically address it is scary. But especially to think that we, as a first world country, Madam Speaker, countries like the Bahamas and Jamaica have these legislations in place. Slowly, different countries such as these are putting legislation in place to address or deal with sexual harassment specifically. And I believe we need to do this as well. Just take, for example, as has been emphasized previously, the mother with her child who was sexually harassed across the street in the library parking.
I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order, please.
What is your point of order?
Point of order number 35, reference shall not be made to any matter on which judicial decision is pending in way as might, in the opinion of the chair, prejudice the interests of the participants, therefore.
May I ask what point of 35?
Basically, the case being pending would not be, oh, sorry, point 1.
Madam Speaker, may I continue my speech?
In reference to Standing Order 35-1, I will ask you to retract your statement, but yes, you may continue your speech.
I retract my statement. May I continue? As the Honorable Premier stated previously, work on the legislation began in 2005. The bill was published by the Law Reform Commission in 2012, but was never passed, according to Cayman Compass in 2021. Madam Speaker, all I'm saying is that we shouldn't sit around and be retroactive, but proactive. We shouldn't wait until the worst happens to our future before we put measures in places to protect them. And so I implore the opposition to vote yes to this bill and not let another 16 years pass before this bill or something similar comes back in this House. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, anyone can be sexually harassed. So we must stand together against it. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for West Bay North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I officially begin my speech, I would like to make an acknowledgement, please. That's not a part of my time of the speech.
Granted.
Thank you.
Actually, elected member for West Bay North, could you please go on with your speech as time will not allow you to make an acknowledgement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in this House today to support the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022. With my support, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the purpose of this bill, a purpose in which the safety, security, and well-being of our people is prioritized. And with this prioritization comes responsibility. The responsibility in which we each hold ourselves accountable to ensure the priorities of our people come first as our country continues to progress and our society continues to evolve. Madam Speaker, for some, a conversation on sexual harassment may be uncomfortable, but for others, this conversation is needed. Needed in the sense that those who have been victimized feel oppressed, unable to come forward and seek justice, to seek help, and to heal. Madam Speaker, it is with these reasons that in this House today, the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022 has been moved. Respectively, Madam Speaker, throughout the various parts of this bill, I would like to refer to Part 5, the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. The manner in which this part was drafted was in accordance with Section 9, pending legal proceedings within the statutory instruments of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009. With respect to this section of the Constitution, this bill was carefully thought out according to this written charter of government to provide security to all citizens and to ensure that in any reported case which relates to an act of sexual harassment, regardless of the respective party, whether it's the plaintiff or the defendant, will have their case heard and determined by a tribunal consisting of legal professionals who are trained and certified mediators. Madam Speaker, with a general review of Part 5 of the bill, it is with my reflection I'd like to state that within our society, the general discussion on sexual harassment is hush-hush. In terms of this, Madam Speaker, I wish to lay on the table an article by the Cayman Compass titled Compass Special Report, Sexual Harassment is Rife in Cayman. This publication refers to local statistics gathered by our local media source. Now, earlier, when the member from Cayman Brac rose, I also provided documents which refer to the United Nations Women's Charter, which provides statistics on an international level, which supports and proves that unreported cases of sexual harassment are unaccounted for, which provides a dire need for this bill to be passed to ensure our people have a safe route to take in order to put themselves forward to seek justice and to have their cases heard. Now, Madam Speaker, it is with knowing how our society functions that we each need to reflect on who we are as a people and the standards of ethics and common decency in which we uphold ourselves and one another to. With such standards, our people have publicly spoken out on their concerns and views of sexual harassment in a public matter. And the significance of this special report, as I referred to the Cayman Compass report, highlights the need to end the culture of silence, considering harassment is linked to a slew of more serious issues, such as abuse and assault. It is with this need to end the culture of silence, the context of the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022 consists of the views and opinions of our people, bringing to light the need for sexual harassment to be enacted as a criminal offense in the Cayman Islands, with the mandated implementation of policies in the workplace and educational institutions. Respectively, Madam Speaker, the discussion on sexual harassment in this House today is significant And with this significance, this government has carefully thought out the components of this bill. And with such components, I stand to support this bill and advise the members of the opposition to do the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Prospect.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in this Parliament. As we have established, government has created a bill about criminalizing sexual harassment. Today, I will be discussing how the short training time of small businesses can lead to more incidences of sexual harassment compared to bigger businesses. This government plans to implement a sexual harassment bill that, according to Part 3, Clause 7, Subclause 1, states that within 2 months of the coming into force of this act, an employer shall formulate a written sexual harassment policy, which is to be implemented in the workplace. This, Madam Speaker, is asking too much. Madam Speaker, in the opposition's eyes, this will be near to impossible for small businesses to complete. Madam Speaker, how are the smaller businesses able to fulfill this great undertaking? Madam Speaker, even looking at the current circumstances considering COVID-19, small businesses are still recovering from the recession that they would have experienced in those 2 years of inactivity. Many businesses, including critical services like banks, have been forced to close branches, shorten hours, or reduce staffing amid the impact of the coronavirus. So how does this government expect for this to be put in place 2 months after the reception of this bill? Now,
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of order. Relevance. How is this relevant to the bill?
Madam Speaker, this is relevant to the bill because small businesses, due to this COVID-19 that impacted the entire island, which we had to go into a lockdown, small businesses weren't able to sell their product. So now them implementing.
Honorable Attorney General, please allow the elected member to finish their statement. Continue.
Now they wouldn't be able to sell anything because they would have to stay at home. And now we're just coming back into the.
Please allow her to finish her statement.
And now coming back into their business now, they have to put in a sexual harassment policy within that 2 months when they're just coming back from a lockdown. They don't have the time, they don't have the money to be able to produce this. So how does the government expect for that to happen? There's relevance to the COVID-19 because small businesses were affected.
Please continue your speech.
Now, continuing this bill is a handful that belongs in the landfill. It is so hard to read, much less comprehend. This government is only showing that they care about the bigger man. They only care about the bigger businesses. Madam Speaker,
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of order. Point of order 41. 1. Irrelevance to the debate and repetition. How does businesses have anything to do with sexual harassment as well as COVID-19?
Honorable Minister of Education, the elected member has stated how her point is relevant, so I'll ask her to continue your speech, please.
Madam Speaker, it seems as though this government is not considering the planning and time that must be taken to put in place a policy. On average, it will take about 2 to 3 weeks to be able to formulate the policy, and that is excluding the time it takes human resources to approve and put in place a policy that will encompass the extentivities of this bill. There are several processes entailed in the creation of a sexual harassment policy, and Madam Speaker, for the government to say that within 2 months that the policy needs to be completed by then is simply preposterous. In addition, small businesses cannot afford the money to pay for human resources to cross-check and provide training for employees on the new policy in place.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Point of order. Can I have some documentation on how long it takes to craft a bill or how long it would be to put this placement into the workplaces?
Elected member, do you have supporting documentation?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I do.
Please present it. Elected member, you may continue your speech.
Madam Speaker, this government continues to put the bigger man first and neglect the smaller man, and that is an issue in itself. How can we as an island look up to them when they are completely disregarding the smaller businesses who make up the heart and soul of Cayman? Also, due to the less amount of employees and less annual revenue, small businesses have been at a disadvantage. Annual revenue is the yearly income a business makes. Now, compared to bigger businesses who have more annual revenue, smaller businesses do not have a fair shot. Due to the lack of a human resources,
Honorable Attorney General, can you please direct your point of order to another member who will speak after the elected member? Elected member, please continue your speech.
due to the lack of a human resources, they have to aid assistance from a bigger business to check over their sexual harassment policy, which sometimes comes at a hefty fee. Madam Speaker, is this what the government is trying to achieve with this bill? The bankruptcy of their smaller businesses? To close, I would like to say that the opposition acknowledges the fact that sexual harassment is a problem that needs to be addressed. But the government's bill does not put the best interests of smaller businesses, and this is evident in their bill. Madam Speaker, if we pass this bill, we will be putting smaller businesses at risk. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our youth absolutely cannot afford another second where this bill is not law. It is a stain on this country that we do not have an outline for sexual harassment like the other 150 countries in the world. Are we animals? No. We are people. We have laws. But looking at this country right now, all I see are the pigs who avoid the truth and the cowards who are choosing to be willingly ignorant to the fact that people are suffering.
I recognize the elected member for Newlands.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Unparliamentary words are not allowed.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, I will ask you to refrain from using unparliamentary language in this House, and you may continue your speech.
Madam Speaker, I was not referring to the opposition as pigs or cowards. I was referring to those who choose to be willingly ignorant to the fact that people are suffering in their own nation and choose to further this pigs, as that is inhumane and reprehensible. Our brothers and sisters who report experiencing the absolutely grave injustice of sexual harassment report greater depressive symptoms than their non-harassed counterparts who get to continue to lead their healthy lives.
I recognize the elected member for East End.
Point of order. Is there physical evidence to prove this statement?
Yes, there is, Madam Speaker.
Please present it.
And there's, okay.
You may continue your speech.
I would like to reiterate this fact to the Madam Speaker, that this devastating event happens absolutely uncalled for and is absolutely unacceptable. That this torment is affecting people who've done absolutely nothing wrong or anything to push the state onto themselves. The youth requires this bill, as it will build an intense, strong sense of faith in this country. The government is constantly and consistently looking out for them. Is the opposition not looking out for them? If this bill is passed, it will protect the youth from the torturous plague of sexual harassment in the Cayman Islands. Furthermore, it will not only protect the youth, but also assist them in knowing what to do if this tragedy does occur. This is because currently they have one option when this happens: do nothing. This is a completely avoidable, heartbreaking reality for thousands of Caymanians. But if this bill is passed, this disgusting injustice will no longer continue, as Caymanians will now have the proper
I
facilities.
recognize the elected member for Newlands.
Madam Speaker, the statement that this honorable member has just stated was untrue. If matters of sexual harassment can be reported, it's just a matter of if the person who was sexually harassed wants to report it, and oftentimes this is not the case. So what you said is untrue, and I'd like you to retract your statement.
Honorable Minister, please retract your statement.
Madam Speaker, that was a point of elucidation, not a point of order. And furthermore, there is no laws that if it happens outside the workplace, and many people who do report experience sexual harassment.
I recognize the honorable elected member of Newlands. Sorry.
Madam Speaker, this honorable member is showing his lack of research. I literally stated in my speech that the penal code is used to penalize harassment and sexual harassment. So what you're saying is incorrect and irrelevant.
Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, please retract your statement.
Madam Speaker, this bill is required, as many people who do experience sexual harassment face repercussions for it. So clearly that means that the previous laws are not sufficient enough, and this bill must be passed.
Please continue your speech.
But if this bill is passed, this disgusting abuse will no longer continue, as Caymanians will now have the proper facilities to take action against their abusers. Under the current system, where victims' only option is to submit and keep quiet, it adds on to the mountain of suffering victims are already experiencing. This is because sexual harassment has been proven time and time again to be a significant stressor on the lives of people who suffer from it, particularly in the case of male victims. I state this as men have drastically reduced lifespans in comparison to women, caused by large amounts of stress while not being taught how to express or deal with stress.
I recognize the honorable leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Point of order. Can the honourable member please present evidence that proves that women have drastically longer lifespans than men?
Yes, I can, Madam Speaker.
Where's the other copies?
May this evidence please be presented to me as well?
Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, please continue your speech.
Therefore, pushing this major stressor on those who have no capability to deal with it is inhumane and reprehensible from those who oppose this bill. Men have roughly 6% lower lifespans than women. Imagine that. 6%. Madam Speaker, if the opposition wants
I recognize the honorable leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The evidence that he has presented doesn't even have a source, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Minister, please continue your speech.
Madam Speaker, if the opposition wants to further this divide and inequity, they should not be in youth parliament, as they are not acting in the interest of future and youthful Caymanians, with their bright futures being sunk down and overshadowed by the despicable fact that sexual harassment is still not defined within the law. Madam Speaker, if the bill is not passed, it will leave these tragic victims with absolutely no options. No options except to ball it up, causing tremendous amounts of stress and decreasing their lifespans of young Caymanians by leaps and bounds. Is this what the opposition wants for our future, for our children? I pray I'm incorrect, Madam Speaker. Fourthly, sexual harassment is and causes depressive symptoms in the lives of victims. To clarify, depressive symptoms are not simply feeling sad. It is a cataclysmic event that stains along with spreads to all corners of victims' life before entirely consuming them. This ignores the hugely alarming fact that depressive symptoms can and frequently do evolve into numerous other disorders, including, but not limited to, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as many others, that if I were to list them all, I would burn through my time. I suspect some members of the opposition may argue that I'm exaggerating. However, Madam Speaker, I can assure you, I absolutely am not. Depressive symptoms linger for months or years if one is lucky. Solving them in a day or week is undeniably an impossible task that should not be put on anyone, especially those who have done nothing to push that fate onto themselves. And in a time when suicide rates and mental health are worsening every single day,
Honorable Minister, your time is up.
May I conclude?
You may conclude.
To conclude, sexual harassment has been proven to be a stressor, cause of, and also itself a depressive symptom, a cause of hatred to the government, and simply unfair and disgusting. If the opposition has any respect for this country, they will vote for our bill to continue to protect the future of all Caymanians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing, and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I take this opportunity to present my support for the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022. Sexual harassment is a real issue that has gone unnoticed for a long period of time, but not anymore. Why is it that whenever the topic of sexual harassment is brought up, it is assumed that it does not happen here within the Cayman Islands? Madam Speaker, this is not just a worldwide issue, but it's also a local issue happening here within our own country. We all have the right to live freely without being harassed. We must take a stand and protect our people from this harassment. Victims should not have to question the absence of a sexual harassment law. Madam Speaker, according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, nationwide, 81% of women and 43% of men reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment. Now bringing a focus within Cayman Islands. According to Cayman Compass, an anonymous survey on the issue of sexual harassment attracted more than 160 responses in just a couple of days. And 90% of those who responded said they had faced some form of inappropriate sexual conduct in Cayman. Numerous victims of sexual harassment do not know where to turn for help. Where is the protection for these people? Here, within the Cayman Islands, victims have experienced sexual harassment within the workplace, within the community, and even within the schools. We, as the government, are taking measures to protect our people and the victims of sexual harassment. The perpetrator must and will be held accountable. Don't we want to protect the youth, to protect the women and men of tomorrow, to protect our people? Then we must do what is necessary, and we must stop trying to quiet down the issue and face it. Madam Speaker, this government recognizes the issue of sexual harassment and aims to bring about true protection. Madam Speaker, many of our youth have either witnessed or experienced sexual harassment, and little to nothing has been done to protect them. Why is it that the youth of the Cayman Islands have little to no knowledge on the concern of sexual harassment and what it entails? Why don't our schools provide a curriculum to talk about these things? Because, unfortunately, we're told that the subject is too inappropriate or too mature to talk about to youth. But Madam Speaker, youth and some are experiencing sexual harassment. Victims come in many ages. So the excuse of being too young to be educated on sexual harassment needs to stop, because even the youth needs protection. Madam Speaker, this Sexual Harassment Bill 2022 will provide protection for victims of sexual harassment. It will hold the perpetrators accountable, and it will enforce policies to be set within workplaces and allow youth to be educated and aware about sexual harassment. Anyone who opposes this sexual harassment bill truly does not care for the victims of sexual harassment and the protection of our people. All I've been hearing is excuses.
I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, point of order, please.
Please state your point of order.
Intentions, the government has applied or inferred that the opposition has very bad intentions with this.
Honorable Minister of Planning, you are imposing improper motives against the opposition. Please retract your
I
statement.
did not mention the opposition. I said anyone who opposes this sexual harassment bill.
That's kind of the whole point of this debate, yeah.
It's your choice to
Honorable
oppose
Minister,
it.
please continue your speech.
Thank you. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, sexual harassment is a harsh, realistic nightmare that poses recurring issues in our society. The goal of the Sexual Harassment Bill 2022 is not only to spread awareness about sexual harassment, but also to educate about the topic and provide true legal protection for victims. So I urge everyone in this House to support this sexual harassment bill for the victims, for the children, for the women and men, and overall for the safety of our country. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to table the internal anti-workplace sexual harassment policy of the Civil Service. Madam Speaker, the article in the Cayman Compass, which gave voices of the complaints of several women in the community regarding their views on sexual harassment in their workplace, has been mentioned countless times by the members of the government. Madam Speaker, I too have read that article. And whilst the article does not state where the women who participated in the survey that the article is based on work, I am confident that none of the participants worked in the civil service. The civil service currently have a comprehensive anti-workplace sexual harassment policy, which has specific offenses and strict rules for reporting incidents of harassment and the ramifications of these allegations. Madam Speaker, this bill that is being put forward will affect the civil service. And as stated in the bill, in Clause 6, Subclause 3, this bill will require mandating sexual harassment policies in the workplace, which does include the government. And as I just stated, there is a sexual harassment policy in place, but it is a policy and not a law. And while I am confident that any complaint that is made within the civil service is dealt with properly, a law would only strengthen the protection of the thousands of civil servants that will most definitely make them feel safer. As a civil service employee working under the government who speaks and represents its people, it is a requirement that upon entering the workplace that most employees spend most of their days, that they feel safe and that their voices are heard and their complaints and reports are investigated. Madam Speaker, sexual harassment can occur in many ways, and improper or unpleasant behavior, such as catcalling or unwelcome approaches, both physical and verbal sexual harassment, is most definitely considered sexual harassment. When this bill is implemented, Madam Speaker, it will require the civil service to improve upon their current policy. And as a deputy governor, it is my duty to protect all civil servants. And this is the reason why I personally agree with this bill. On a day-to-day workday for government officials, this bill would not affect government's employees' productivity. The current civil service policy, which is the workplace sexual harassment policy, as I mentioned earlier, limits sexual harassment to the workplace only and does not include a sexual harassment tribunal, which is needed for a workplace and for educational institutions for these offenses to be treated properly. Madam Speaker, according to the NSVRC, which is the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, an article published in 2018 states that 25% of the individuals who are sexually harassed are having victims of rape reported. And of the 75% that does not report it, in many cases, the reason is that because they have little to no confidence that their attackers would be brought to justice. The opposition may question the importance of this bill, but I would say to them, question the importance of the voices of these persons who have been sexually harassed, whether verbally or physically, and feel that they must be kept quiet. Is each and every victim not important and deserving of a fair chance of justice? And to be assured that there are provisions in place to address any complaints that might arise. Madam Speaker, this bill will act as a safety net for these victims. And as the Deputy Governor, Madam Speaker, I welcome any opportunity to improve the provisions that are currently in place and to assure that all civil servants, that the civil service is a place to work which is safe and harassment-free. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government's bill defines the complainant as a person whom or on whose behalf a complaint of sexual harassment is made, though not necessarily a person who has been allegedly harassed. The bill later states that the age of the complainant is relevant to whether or not the offense of sexual harassment has been committed, of which does not really make sense, especially when anyone at any age can be sexually harassed. My question to the government is, why does age play a factor in determining whether someone has been sexually harassed or not? Bringing age into the equation can then cause for dismissal of someone else's case, such as disregarding what an older woman says compared to a young child. Will the old woman's case get dismissed versus if a younger child was to report it? A person's age should be completely irrelevant when considering the allegation. In doing so can help to solidify proper penalties when executing the conviction. To continue along the lines of prosecution, the bill states the employer is expected to formulate a written sexual harassment policy, a policy in which is to be implemented in the workplace. Doing this results in a statement explaining how the employer will deal with sexual harassment directed towards an employee or a third party by another employee. A statement which results in an employee taking disciplinary action, though in clause 8, subsection 1, subject to subsection 2, where a complaint of sexual harassment is made to an employer, the employer shall file a report with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service within 2 business days of receiving the complaint. This presents for a double prosecution in that the alleged offender will face 2 disciplinary actions. Doing so is completely unnecessary, as conducting both will result in a waste of time and resources from both parties. when using one of these options could be just as beneficial and effective as prosecution. Sorry, when using one of these options would be just as beneficial and effective in prosecution. So why waste the time of the RCIPS when a matter of such can be dealt with within the business itself, or rather vice versa? Why should the business deal with it if it's a quote criminal matter to be dealt with by the RCIPS? Furthermore, if a business decides to
I
complete...
recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, points of elucidation.
Elected member, do you give way?
No.
Please
Furthermore,
continue.
if a business decides to completely disregard what has been implemented, where is that standard and security there? How will employees feel being employed under someone who completely disregards their comfort? Yes, there are consequences of this. The bill states in Clause 8, Subclause 4, quote, an employer who contravenes subsection 1 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $5,000, end quote. Though what is concerning is that there are no other pressing consequences as a result of disregarding this. The fine can easily be paid by someone who does not care or who does not want any bad press pertaining to their business or their company. To conclude, why does the government think that it is optimal to implement a bill that will be, one, so easily disregarded? Continue. That will be so easily disregarded due to mild repercussion, as well as unfair age sanctions and abuse of time and resources.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, while this government may be well-intentioned, while it may be comprised of a group of undoubtedly intelligent individuals, and while their aims may be just, this is all true. The bill that is presented in front of me today leads way to something that is not as just, leads way to something that is not as intelligent, leads way to something that is not as virtuous as the intentions of the government today. This bill is open to so much abuse and so many ways to be corrupted and used for the corrupt intentions of individuals. Why is this the case? Well, Madam Speaker, it's because this bill is extremely subjective in nature. I reference Clause 7, Subclause 2F. Quote, the sexual harassment policy referred to in subsection 1 shall include F, a statement indicating that the employer will take such disciplinary measures as the employer considers appropriate against any person under the employer's direction who subjects any employee or a third party to sexual harassment, etc. Madam Speaker, I do not think it is appropriate to leave this in the hands of the employer and not be defined by law. This presents a huge problem for bias, as an employer will easily be able to take advantage of this and add more lenient punishments to those in the employer's favor, while being more harsh to those that are not. Another example of this in the bill, Clause 9, Subclause 2B. However, this was referred to in another speech, so I will be very limited with this. Upon reviewing the evidence, the employer is satisfied that the conduct of the respondent amounted to sexual harassment. This gives the employer to place an employee under leave and is another example of how the employer is given power to use this and use their bias. The leader of the opposition has already made clear how the definitions for sexual harassment in this bill are too broad and will attempt to build a wall of law on the unstable foundation that is the blurry line between a harmless compliment and a reprehensible remark in regards to the verbal section. This would make every case extremely subjective. Madam Speaker, the way sexual harassment is defined, almost any interaction in the dating realm will now be defined as unwelcome, with unwelcome being defined as, quote, in relation to sexual behavior means any conduct of a sexual nature in relation to another person without that person's explicit consent, with explicit being defined as, quote, stated clearly in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. None at all. With this definition, any unsuccessful attempt to flirt, hit on, or even compliment another individual will now be able to be defined as sexual harassment. And this leaves more than enough room to abuse this bill, as any gesture, compliment, or even comment to another individual could fall within this bill's definition of sexual harassment. Now, the government may argue that a law is not made to be broken, and this is a valid statement and true in every sense of the word. However, this is not what I am arguing today.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, point of elucidation.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, do you give way?
Yes.
Madam Speaker, is the opposition implying that us as the government make all the rules and you as the opposition propose sorry. Mind repeating your point?
I would mind, and I would like to continue for time's sake, please. May I continue, Madam Speaker?
Please continue your speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. However, this is not what I am arguing. As the way that this bill is laid out, it'll be easy to take advantage of, and these people will be able to use their bias and the corrupt intentions without violating this bill, as it is so easy to prove sexual harassment under this bill's definition. Now, Madam Speaker, does this remind you of anything in particular? Because it does to me. The Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act. Now, for those of you that may not know, this act, while having good intentions, was heavily abused by government officials and citizens alike to imprison Black Americans at the time. This act was passed in order to reduce drug use for the betterment of our society, a righteous goal, just as the goal of the government's is. We as the opposition do not argue that sexual harassment is not a problem, and we agree with the government that something needs to be done. However, what they have presented today, we believe, is not the case. And as most of us know, the example I'm providing led to decades of abuse in order to oppress minorities and tear apart families. This is what I am reminded of when I read this bill, a government which, although well-intentioned, undoubtedly has, purposefully or not, given many the opportunity to abuse the laws being proposed. It could well be a matter of getting revenge, racism, sexism, pettiness, irrelevant to why the reason, but there are so many ways that these reasons can be and may be and perhaps will be used to take advantage of these laws. And these abuse will lead to a clog in the justice system. We hope that we do not have to bring out a plunger to unclog this metaphorical clog. Now, Madam Speaker, I conclude to you today. Yes, the government obviously has their just intentions, and we agree that something needs to be done. However, I recommend that this bill go under amendment and should not be passed in its current state because it is unable to be passed, and then for us to be able to say that we have done everything in our power for all of our citizens on the Cayman Islands, the citizens which all of us in this building represent, the citizens represented by the pin on every single person in this room.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, your time is up.
May I ask for an additional 30 seconds, Miss? Madam Speaker.
You may.
Thank you. I conclude, and I will be very brief. We do not argue that something does not need to be done, but rather that this bill is not ready. And I would like to ask the government to put their intelligent minds to work to amend this bill, but I cannot pass it in its current state, as that would be against my good conscience and those of every person in this room in good conscience. I close and thank you all for your time.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe it's essential that the Sexual Harassment Bill of 2022 is passed. I feel very strongly about this subject. As a young woman, I feel it's essential to bring attention to the fact that young women are the biggest targets of sexual harassment. 97% of women ages 18 to 24 experience it, according to an investigation done by the United Nations. That is an alarming statistic and frankly quite horrifying. Most women experience this during their lifetime, and that is disgusting. As women, we are constantly catcalled and objectified or told to ignore it or brush it off because it has become normalized in our society. The fact that this has not been brought to attention sooner is sad. I'm disappointed that the youth have had to make this proposition. But it's not just women that are affected, it's everyone. Men experience sexual harassment as well, but it's simply not talked about. People tend to become awkward as soon as they hear the topic even brought up. I would also like to focus on the emotional aspect of sexual harassment, as it affects physical and mental well-being of victims. Mostly in young people, studies have shown that victims of sexual harassment are less able to trust others, suffer from lower self-esteem, a higher rate of developing serious depression and anxiety. This is proven by Associate Professor Mons Ben-Dixon at NTNU's Department of Psychology. Currently, people will not come forward, even though crimes have been committed against them, as a fear of repeat by the offender, or they're embarrassed about it. 96% of people did not believe in reporting it would change anything, according to an article done by the Open Access government. Let me state, this is not something to be embarrassed about. You have been taken advantage of. But by passing this bill, we're putting in consequences in place, so coming forward discourages future offenders and is now a clearly punishable act and strictly enforced. An example of this is potentially getting the offender jail time or a fine. I would then like to look at the educational sector, as children do not know how to respond to things like sexual harassment. They may not feel confident enough to report it or will simply brush it off. They also may be denied or dismissed due to the fact that they are children. Minors or even adults may feel intimidated or confused, as they are not sure what class is acceptable or unacceptable because there's been little to no education on this done. So, this must be forced upon educational institutions. How do you think parents will react to the fact that this bill has not been put into motion? If it was me, I was shocked. To find out that this bill was not put into motion, I was shocked. I was appalled and I was disgusted. According to the 2020 harassment survey done by the Government Equalities Office, 72% of the UK population experienced sexual harassment in a lifetime. And that's only the people that were willing to admit this. Cayman is a much smaller community, and we must protect the population by not delaying the passing of the bill. This is just another example of why this bill needs to be put into motion, as it prevents future cases of sexual harassment and encourages members of the public to speak up about previous incidences of how they fell victim to these accounts, and something like can actually be done about it. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, it would be distressing if this bill is not passed, as it is our job as the government to represent the people of the Cayman Islands. And it is our job to allow this bill to pass, as it protects the people. We, as the government, and you, as the opposition, have been put in place by the people to represent the people. And by not passing this bill, you are therefore going against the people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sexual harassment is a matter of concern within our border community, especially amongst our youth who become the vocal who have become vocal on this topic of discussion. And by recognizing this, we, the government, have conceptualized this bill. Madam Speaker, in regard to this topic of discussion, our children, our peers have noticed a lack of protection for them against sexual harassment. The Cayman Islands Law Reform Commission wrote, culture, perceptions, attitudes, and justifications for sexual harassment have contributed to a failure to understand and adequately respond to the problem. Too many persons do not know how to report sexual harassment or from who to seek assistance from. And yet, this is a civil right and a safety concern. This is due to the fact that there is no comprehensive legislation to inform, to respond to the issue. This is due to the fact that there is minimal information that could even remotely inform them of how to protect youth and others from mental or emotional repercussions that infuse with their ability to reach educational potential. It is with this lack of protection for our youth due to the insufficient education that I will be focusing on the clauses in this bill regarding the implementation of public education about sexual harassment within educational institutions. Madam Speaker, when the topic is discussed, it is mostly females portrayed as victims and males portrayed as the offender. But Madam Speaker, we, the government, seek to end this bias. Young people are not taught about healthy relationships and receive very little sex education. The Red Cross argues that teaching children about consent and personal empowerment in an age-appropriate way is essential to addressing the issue later in life. When it comes to the education of sexual harassment within our schools, there is what amounts to none. There is no information, if any at all, being provided to our children or our peers.
I recognize the elected member for East End.
I would
Honorable
like to
Premier,
see, point of order. I would like to see some evidence to prove that statement.
Honorable Deputy Premier, do you have the evidence to support?
I currently do not have the school syllabus with me.
I therefore ask the honorable member to retract their statement, please.
Honorable Deputy Premier, please retract your statement, seeing as though you don't have the evidence to support. You may continue your speech.
We, the government, want to educate our youth by putting in place the topic of sexual harassment in life skills courses or health class. Students will be taught how to seek and provide help when needed on responsible decision-making in terms of ethical, safety, and respect. Students will learn skills of impulse control, resisting social pressure. They'll be informed of how to constructively prevent, manage, and resolve interpersonal conflict. Everyone will be taught rules that persons are not to be verbally or physically harassed. Madam Speaker, an article done by Cayman Compass written by Rashima Van Gogh on June 29th, 2021, meaning it is not that long ago, featured 3 young females taking up the issue for a project in class, all 3 attending high school, which further reinforces the fact that sexual harassment is a widespread issue. A survey done by the students showed that 97%.
I recognize the elected member for East End.
Madam Speaker, point of order. I would like to ask for evidence to prove this statement.
Honorable Deputy Premier, please provide the evidence.
May I ask if you would like a copy?
Honorable Deputy Premier, please continue your speech.
Male students are also affected by sexual harassment, which, just like females, go widely unreported. The mere fact that this topic is not actively discussed with reinforced awareness will make Mother Mary weep. On March 8th, 2022, we celebrated women. To the future women in this room who are leaders of tomorrow, we not only ask the leaders of today to pass the 2022 sexual harassment bill, but the leaders of now to pass the sexual harassment bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the elected member for Georgetown South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, trouble don't blow conch shell. With protocol already established, I want to applaud the government on their valiant efforts in such a vital bill. We can all agree that sexual harassment is pervasive. There's no industry or institution that isn't affected by it. But Madam Speaker, I'll repeat, trouble don't blow conch shell. Madam Speaker, for those who may not understand, back in the olden days, the conch shell was used to signal when trouble was coming.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Relevance?
Elected member for Georgetown South, please get to the point.
I'm getting to the point. The relevance is that their bill is irrelevant. Madam Speaker, like I said, the relevance was behind that. When the conch shell was blowing, the government walked in. The reasoning behind their bill is applaudable, but it's filled with too much trials, errors, and tribulations. The members of this opposition have already highlighted multiple issues, too many issues for that matter. Madam Speaker, the problem is the government is spending too much time focusing on solutions to sexual harassment and not prevention. After all, prevention is better than cure. Madam Speaker, sexual harassment tends to happen in mostly male-dominated industries.
I recognize the Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, point of elucidation.
Elected member for Georgetown South, do you give way?
I do.
Madam Speaker, the member stated that the government's focusing on solutions and not prevention. Is the member trying to suggest that offenders who've committed sexual harassment must not face any repercussions? Is he saying that they must have no consequence?
Elected member for Georgetown South.
I am not saying that they don't deserve to be persecuted. However, I am saying if there was more prevention in place, we wouldn't have to focus on so much persecutions.
Please continue your speech.
Madam Speaker, one thing for fact, two things for certain, I have several problems from the clauses in this bill. In no particular order, I want to draw your undivided attention to the tomfoolery of Clause 3, Section 9, Subsection 2A, which states that the respondent who's alleged to have committed acts of sexual harassment should not be placed on leave unless the safety and well-being of the complainant is under direct threat from the respondent. Madam Speaker, this is quite frankly negligence at its finest, and at this rate is very dismissive. Madam Speaker, this complaint has already been put in a position of direct threat of their safety and well-being. Is it the option to allow the assailant to stay and only intervene when the victim is further harassed? Someone who is brave enough to report harassment should not have to work with their assailant until their employer is deemed fit to report it or take actions. Madam Speaker, Part 3, Section 7 has various harassment policy statements, but simple statements saying that every employee is entitled to the employment free from sexual harassment is not enough. Not enough for this opposition, not enough for this parliament, not enough for the people of the Cayman Islands. In fact, it's the bare minimum, and does little to hold employers and employees accountable for their non-consensual behaviors. Madam Speaker, can you believe I have more to say? Part 3, Section 8, Subsection 1 states that employers shall have filed report with the RCIPS within 2 business days. Madam Speaker, I don't need to ask that question because I believe the government was under the influence of writing such a statement. Madam Speaker, reporting of the complaint to the RCIPS should take no longer than 24 hours, not 1 business day, not 2 business.
Madam Speaker, point of order. Motives? Was the elected member suggesting that the government was under the influence?
It was my thought, it's my opinion, and just like my opinion is my business, and you should stay out of it.
Honorable Minister of Education, please be seated. Elected member, please continue your speech.
Reporting of complaints should take no longer than 24 hours, not one business day, not 2 business day, not when Seymour, Jerk, Stan, Sellout, or John's on top of the moon. 24 hours. Sexual harassment is a serious offense, and if a victim does not deserve to wait 2 business days for actions to be taken to the RCIPS. Madam Speaker, I close by saying this. If the government is willing to change certain clauses, listen to the advice of the opposition, and put Cayman first, we as the opposition will be more than happy to stand by this bill. If not, Madam Speaker, trouble don't blow conch shell, but this opposition will. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
At this convenient time, the House will suspend its proceedings for lunch. I ask all members to return to the chamber promptly at 2:35 p.m.